Lovely to have you with us. My name is Nick. I am the founder and CEO of a company called CoTeam, who really been working a lot with in the sort of commercial sector around trying to help build better leadership qualities across teams. So this webinar today is a little bit left field for us. This is looking at some work that we've been doing here in the UK recently with an education trust. And we're joined today by Laura Taylor. I'll let her introduce herself in just a minute, talking about why it's important to facilitate and to encourage these type of behaviors within teaching and support staff across schools in the UK. So really interesting session that we've got ahead for us. Again, like I said, something quite different for us at CoTeam, but something that, being very passionate about learning and education myself, this has been a project that I've personally been very excited to be involved in, and think the work that Laura and her team are doing at the 318 Education Trust is really phenomenal and really setting a gold standard for this. So very excited to introduce her soon. We also have a live Q&A going today. So at any point, if you want to scan the QR code there that you see on the screen, grab your phone out now and do that. I'll also drop the link to it in the chat if that's easier to do. You can ask questions. We're going to pick those up at the end. We had some fantastic questions actually asked in the pre-registration as well. But yeah, any questions that come up throughout, please just feel free to click that link or scan the QR code. It is anonymized. So we won't know who asked the question, but hopefully you can give us some good ones. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce Laura. Laura, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you for letting me be part of this. Welcome, everybody. I'm really excited to be here today hosting this webinar. I'd like to start firstly by introducing myself and the trust that I work at. So I'm HR Director here at the 3 to 18 Education Trust. We're a multi-academy trust based in Shropshire. We're currently at 9 schools with a mix of primary and nursery provision, secondary education and sixth form provision. We also have an all-through school and a state boarding school as well. And there's not many schools out there that offer state boarding provision. So it's interesting to be part of a school that actually has that as well. We've had rapid expansion over the previous 12 months, where we've almost doubled in size quite rapidly. And we're looking at embracing further growth as well. So that's a little bit of a background information to me. What I'm going to do is move on to the next slide, and that's what to expect from today's session. So firstly, I'm going to introduce the behind the scenes really of how this programme came to fruition. So on an able journey, of where we are today, and learn and support staff together, which you don't often see in the education sector. Explore why embracing a growth mindset is key, and Nick will step in at that point as well and sort of give a little bit of synopsis about what a growth mindset is, and I'll look to share with you how that underpins our programme. And finally, I'll talk through driving real change, because at the end of the day, whatever we look to embrace within our trust, and it will be the same with you within your schools and your maths or your SAT, you really want to drive school improvement and drive impact. So I've got some real life examples to share with you of how this programme has been able to. Okay, so on to the next. I suppose to chat really with you a little bit about my experience and how I suppose the programme came into fruition. I'm a HR director at the moment, but I haven't always been in HR. I did have a HR career both in the private and public sector prior to having my family. And at that point, I decided to take a step back from working in HR and a step back from my career. And I was a bit of a stay-at-home mum for 3 or 4 years. And then I decided to join a school as a teaching assistant. So I have first-hand experience of being a support staff member in a school. And a teaching assistant is an extremely rewarding post, and I loved every moment of it. And during my time at that school, I also had the opportunity to join the local governing body as a staff member representing staff. And it was an opportunity for me to assist the school with driving improvement. And during my time on the governing body, the head teacher at the time saw and understood my previous career and the potential that I had, and perhaps the drive that I still had. And from that, they commissioned me to do some work for them, which I did in my spare time outside of being a teaching assistant. And that was to do with performance management for support staff. So we're going back to sort of 2012 now, about 10 years ago. And this particular school is currently one that's in our trust, which I'm great that they're part of our trust, because their culture has always been to cultivate their support staff. They saw potential in me. They took an interest in my background. It was cost saving for them to commission work through me. I wasn't charging a HR consultancy rate at that time. And it provided me with an opportunity to keep my hand in HR and training. So it really supported my ongoing development. It got to a point where I wanted to return to my HR career. So unfortunately, I had to leave the school, and I worked for the local authority in the schools department. However, a HR manager post soon came up at a local trust, and I jumped at the chance of being part of that. And this school that I was a teaching assistant at, like I mentioned, was part of the trust. So I knew that I was starting with a culture in this one school that already embraced bringing teaching staff and support staff together. So now I'm HR director. I've been there 5 years. We're up at 9 schools with further plans to grow. And our drive ever since I've started is to create one staff body across all our 9 schools who can access the same opportunities that perhaps teaching staff have in the past. So we're not looking at teaching staff versus support staff, and we don't want that them and us culture to be present. And I think, Nick, you sort of want to jump in at this stage to do a quick poll of the delegates we've got here today.
Yeah, I guess just a really quick question here, like looking at your own trusts and those who've joined us, what is the percentage of support staff within those trusts? Because I think when Laura told me about 318, I was quite surprised, actually. We can reveal that. Hopefully you can see that poll there. We'll get a few answers rolling into that. But support staff, what is the percentage of support staff versus teaching staff? Give you a couple of seconds to answer in there, even if it's a rough guess. Hopefully everyone can see that poll okay as well. Okay, so interesting. We've got 60% majority of you are saying, some saying 40% there as well. So that's quite interesting. What is it at the at 318, Laura? Do you want to?
Yeah, so it's 380, yeah, 318. Teaching staff are 47% and our support staff are 52%. So that's a similar representation to what we've got here. So it's great to see that those delegates here today can see that their support staff do make up quite a big percentage of the staff body. And what we found in schools as they join our mat, they tend to be underrepresented in terms of the level of CPD they're getting. It's not as much as teachers are getting. And a fact is that schools can't function and teachers can't teach without support staff. And therefore our young people won't be able to access as excellent as an education without fulfilling these support staff positions and developing our support staff to their potential. So yeah, that's an interesting feedback to get. And I'm pleased that the delegates on this session recognise that the support staff do make up quite a large percentage of their staff body. So yeah, having experienced that first-hand culture of grow your own, I suppose, it's something that we are looking to do more and more of within our trust. So if we see potential in support staff, and that's everything right from teaching assistants to administrators and to site team. These people are our future finance directors of our trust. We look for succession planning for myself as a HR director. Administrators may be becoming school business managers of the future. So that's where our sort of focus is. So this programme does marry up nicely with our succession planning that we have. And I think with the climate and the current crisis of recruitment and retention, growing your own and retaining high-performing staff is essentially what we're looking at harnessing within our trust and our Aspire programme. So that leads us nicely on to the next slide, which will provide you more with, thank you, Nick, a little bit more insight into what the programme looks like. So our strapline for our programme is developing tomorrow's leaders at all levels of our trust and supporting staff to pursue their ambitions, to progress in their career. Now, I've heavily focused on the support staff, but I don't want you to think that we're ignoring teaching staff either. We're looking at one staff body. And what this programme has done is it is available for teaching staff and support staff to apply and be part of. And we've got a real mix of post holders on this programme, from M1 and M2 teaching staff through to UPS 3. We've got some assistant head teachers who may have already started that leadership journey, right through to your, I'm not sure what grades you use within your schools, but low graded administrators, grade 5 and 6, IT technicians, finance administrators, the marketing people, pastoral support workers and teaching assistants, all of which have that drive to succeed and want to develop their career. And that stands that some of our staff might fly the nest. They may not want to remain with us because we might not have the opportunities for us. And we're happy to do that. We're happy to be part of somebody's development opportunity and supporting them in their career. So we're really passionate about that. But also at the heart of it is about driving school improvement, because that's why we're all here. It's providing an excellent education for the young people that are within our school. So how do we achieve this? So essentially our Aspire Leadership programme is an applied learning programme. So within that programme, the skills and knowledge gained, these members of staff, or what we call our delegates, are going back into their schools and working on a change management programme during their time on this leadership programme. So our 12-month programme has fully interactive workshops, and these 3 bullet points sort of give you an indication of what we cover. So yeah, the 12-month programme is sort of 3 days of workshops, and we've staggered that across the terms. So we have vision and leadership as our first full day, and it's looking at reflecting on your leadership style and developing a leadership style. Our second day has very much been focused on leading and managing change and driving innovation. And thirdly, the third day, it's about the importance of accountability and self-reflection. So holding yourself and others, be that your team or other stakeholders that you link in with, to account. And I'll return to some of this in a moment in terms of the change management programme, because I want to be able to show you what some of the things that our delegates have been working on. But what's been key really through our leadership programme is the networking and collaboration of bringing all our trust schools together and people together that have never met each other, and the positive and optimistic energy that we've seen in the rooms during these days have just been magnificent. And it would be fabulous if we could bottle up their energy and drive and ambition and sprinkle it throughout all of our trust schools. It's something that has just, something that perhaps we didn't really think about, but has also been a return to us for this programme and an investment in terms of that collaboration. And the links they forged, they'll continue with those links whilst they continue working for the trust. So that's been great to see. Now, what's underpinned our programme, and Nick alluded to this at the beginning, is growth mindset. And I think the next slide that Nick will show you talks about this in a little bit more detail.
Yeah, no problems. I think we just want to take a second to talk about growth mindset. Obviously, it's a term that's used quite a lot in the sort of business world. Yeah, funnily enough, comes originally from Carol Dweck's work in the 1970s, which specifically looked at education of students and the way that students who failed approached the idea of failure, popularized a lot by Amy Edmondson in the last sort of 10 years or so, thinking about sort of digital disruption and change management and some of the things that are really happening there. But in essence, this idea of a growth mindset is trying to instill people with the courage to see failure as opportunity and to be open to feedback and to, I guess, love learning and to continuously learn. This idea that I often say improvement or mastery of something is an asymptote. It's a very mathematical term for saying a curved line that never hits the axis. Because no matter how good you are at something, you can inevitably be better at it. And this growth mindset is about this sort of continued quest for excellence and this ability to see setbacks as opportunities. Of course, the flip side of that is a fixed mindset. And it's not necessarily to say that, fixed mindset is always completely wrong. For some scenarios, sometimes a fixed mindset can actually be more appropriate, particularly where there needs to be very, very strong sort of direction, quite top-down management style. But it's certainly by no means the only or the most appropriate in every situation nowadays. So, yeah, Laura originally came to us to ask about the work that we've done around growth mindset with some of our big clients and how maybe we could bring this into the Aspire program, which, like I said at the start of this, was a very different opportunity for us, but I think something that was quite interesting. So maybe, Laura, do you want to talk a little bit about how you brought growth mindset, not just into the workshop that we helped run with you, but into the program as a whole?
Yeah, absolutely. So embracing a growth mindset underpins our whole leadership program. And our first session was very much focused on this, although it does underpin all the other days that we host as well. And like Nick mentioned, we partnered up with Coty and really liked what they've done with previous organisations. On Nick's first slide, you can see some of the huge, blue chip multinational global organisations they've worked with. And for us, it was important to move away from what we usually see within schools and maths, which is very much education CPD, developed by facilitators who are only from an education background. It could be SLT members dropping into schools from other schools and providing that CPD, or teachers dropping in, or local authority from the education sector dropping in and giving CPD. So given that a multi-academy trust is a company that's registered with Companies House, we're our own entity, we need to have that commercial acumen, that business drive, as well as obviously holding on to education. That is why we're here. So Co-Team partnered us up with a great facilitator for our first session, Neil Perkin. You can see him here on the slide. Now, he's worked on leadership events for some huge companies, as you can see on there. So to have him in on day one to open and launch our program was a real treat for our delegates and for me as well. I was sat at the back of the room observing the day, and what our delegates got from this was an insight into leadership from an individual that's worked with great leaders on their own programs. And he's worked with other. I've got a list here actually, Nick. You've provided some on there, but other organisations. We've got Samsung, Warner Brothers, Unilever, YouTube. So they're just huge global organisations. So yeah, it was a real treat. Essentially, what we want to do is to develop our leaders with the same acumen as leaders have in the commercial world. Because essentially, if you're a good leader in a school, you can be a good leader anywhere with those skills and with that knowledge. And Neil really brought that to the table. So I thank Nick for sort of partnering us up with Neil for that first session. So if I can head back to the previous slide, Nick. I think I may have perhaps covered, I may have actually covered everything in that, so we can move on to the next one now. And I think this is about what it really boils down to, which is driving real change within our trust. So I think I spoke about building networks, which naturally came from this, but also developing ideas and taking risks in trying activities and change management projects that perhaps these delegates wouldn't normally have progressed with hadn't it been for this programme. So our Chief Executive Officer opened the programme on the day one, and he mentioned to them, you'll be looking at change management projects that perhaps make you feel nervous, and these are going to test you in your position, but at the same time you're going to grow in confidence. And that's very much the culture that we have within this trust. Take those risks, try those activities that take you outside of your comfort zone. And it very much links into what Nick was talking about, that growth mindset. And it's what we want to embellish throughout our whole trust, perhaps not just with leaders or these aspiring leaders, but with any post holder. So what you can see from here are some of the change management projects that our delegates have been working on. Now, we have 25 delegates on this programme, and when we advertised the programme, the applications were fierce. We had so many who wanted to be part of this, and we did have to go through an application and interview process. So we've got 25 change management projects on the go, and I've just picked just a bit of a variety here. So you can see that there are some that are coming from teaching staff and some that are coming from our support staff. So workload, quick wins to making long-term changes. That's been something that's come from one of our teaching members of staff who's real key on employee well-being, and we've actually employed her as a trust improvement consultant as well to drop into our schools about coaching staff with how they can make quick wins on reducing their workload versus making long-term changes as well. And that's been really valued by all of our trust schools. Another one from a teaching member of staff is bespoke behaviour management. So reviewing behaviour data and making pastoral support bespoke and not generic. If there are the behaviour of specific children, it's looking at that pastoral side, their understanding, and making any sanctions bespoke and how to support them pastorally bespoke as well. We've got an IT technician as a delegate, so he's really hot on cybersecurity. So he's been looking into developing sessions on phishing and social engineering for our schools. Careers in primary, we don't often see it at the level that our delegate who's developed this. It's about engaging pupils early on in careers, especially for those who might be pupil premium or SEND, who often can see dropping out, not engaging in school, not engaging in careers post 16. So it's starting that early on. So they've been dropping into our primary schools that are within our trust. We've been looking at staff benefits to aid recruitment and retention, and that's right through from healthcare provision, private healthcare provision, car leasing scheme, electric and hybrid, electronic devices, buying back annual leave, which has been interesting. We're looking at perhaps offering that out to teaching staff so they can take a week off during term time, and we'll employ a floating teacher to cover their time off. So a bit of a radical change there. We've got curriculum development and instructional coaching programme, embracing flexible and agile working, and we're looking at really honing in on this for teaching staff. Some of our heads don't believe in flexible working for teaching staff, believe they should be there till 9 till 3. But we're looking at embracing that with all of the technology we currently have. And where the delegate that's working on that is currently in conjunction and talks with a flexible working ambassador school that we have in our Midlands region. And then finally, creating a culture of reading, which this particular delegate says is the gateway to success in life. So she's come up with a huge program that is being rolled out trust-wide as well. So I think that just gives you a little bit of a flavour of some of the things that our delegates have been working on as part of this program.
And I think that's such an amazing list. I think we were talking, Laura, about when we went to school, without giving away our age too much, but that it was just such a different world. It was just so I mean, seeing this type of like innovation being encouraged and fostered, and the staff that you're talking about given the space to actually challenge the status quo and to do things differently, just because they've always been done a certain way doesn't mean that's the right way to do them. And I think that's in particular what really inspires me about this whole program. And I know your intention, I guess, is to continue to scale this. You mentioned, the demand was high.
Yes, the demand was certainly high, and we're in a position that perhaps annually we won't be rolling this out to 25 staff, because we'll soon get through all staff, and not all staff want to be a leader or an aspiring leader. But yeah, annually we might look to roll this out, and perhaps 5, 6 or 7 staff may apply for this. But what we'd also like to do is potentially invite other trusts to join our programme, so they can be part of it as well. And I think with that comes greater collaboration and networking, because our staff wouldn't just be networking or collaborating with staff within their own trust, but they'd also be going further afield with either local trusts or even national trusts. With this being a sort of a 3-day programme spread over 12 months, there is perhaps the opportunity for trusts that are further afield and outside of our locality to actually engage and join in physically face-to-face with this. So if anybody's interested in that, Nick will present my email at the end of this session. So please do get in contact with me. Other alternatives that we're looking at is possibly sharing our journey, our learning programme and learning file as a resource. If there are any people who are present today that perhaps think, yeah, perhaps don't want to get involved maybe with your programme, Laura, at the 3 to 18 Trust, but we'd like to take away the resources that perhaps you have and make our own bespoke programme, because it would be a great starter for 10 for you. And we would look at offering that at a nominal cost. We're in the education sector. We're not going to be charging any HR consultancy fees, but just to cover perhaps some of the costs that we've invoked as part of putting it together. But it wouldn't be a huge cost at all. I'm happy to chat through that with anybody as well if they were interested.
Great. And as you said, we'll share your email around here at the end, Laura, as well as some additional resources and this recording of this webinar. For if anyone does, if you're talking to people in other trusts who weren't able to attend today, you can send this out to them so they can find out a bit more about what they've been doing at 3 to 18 as well. Laura, thank you so much for taking us through that. We have had some questions submitted in when people were registering for the session, so I thought we'd go through those quickly. There's 3 really good questions I think that we've selected out, but also just a reminder for anyone here, if you do want to ask questions, please just scan the QR code there or click the link that I've shared on the chat, and you can submit questions. We'll pick those up in a few minutes towards the end of the session. Completely anonymized. So this is I like this question, because it's like, well, what challenges did you face in implementing this program, and how did you overcome them in this growth mindset at its finest? But what challenges have you come across, Laura, and how did you overcome them?
It is a really good program. I suppose challenges from the offset were, to run a program of this nature, you do have to invest in it financially, so it does come at a cost. Now we had 25 delegates, and I'm happy to share with you in terms of what that cost per head was, because I think it's incredible value for money when we take everything into consideration, which is facilitator costs, right through to catering and refreshments and the administration of all the learning files, printing costs, etc., etc. What it works out at per head is £280 per head across the 3 days, which essentially is, if my maths are correct, is about just over £90 per head per day of extremely fulfilling and valuable CPD. And I think that cost has been incredible. And I don't think we would have been able to offer this programme had we gone out and outsourced this completely. Co-team have supported us with some of this, and some of the other days we brought in our own facilitators as well. So it's been very much a partnership approach with co-team on some of those days. So for me, the budget at the beginning, when I had to tell my finance director how many thousands of pounds it was, which was roughly about £7,000, his face was, that's a lot of money, Laura. But when you drill down to what it costs per head, it's extremely great value for money in terms of CPD. And the return on investment is what I had to sell in terms of what we're getting back from this. And obviously we chatted through that in terms of the school improvement and driving that improvement. So in terms of the return investment, I think it will far outweigh the actual initial investment that we've invested on this programme. Another challenge that did come up was some of the heads were reluctant to release their staff. One of the schools wasn't willing to release their staff, but it was about selling the benefits of it. So it's about just being open and honest and what that return on perhaps the cover costs, because they do need to cover their teaching staff if they're out. They need to get in a supply teacher to cover. But when they can see what change management or driving school improvement will be coming back into that school, then they did buy into it. So yeah, just to be pre-warned, if you're going to launch something of this nature, those were the two of the challenges that I faced.
Brilliant, thank you. I can see also got another question submitted towards the end, or specifically around how you measured the tangible outcomes of that. But we'll get to that in a moment. Mm-hmm. Another question from someone who's with us today. So I think you've covered this a little bit already, but bridging the gap between the teaching and the support staff. I imagine there's some politics involved there. That, and as this person correctly points out, it's a little bit of a thorny issue, where it feels like there isn't really a career path for support staff. Did you want to give your thoughts around this? And yeah.
Yes, yeah, no, I completely agree with this. Within the schools as they join us, support staff often feel undervalued because there isn't a career pathway for them, and there's a heavy career pathway for teachers moving up and through the scales with heavy investment on CPD. So yeah, this is a good question to ask. What we've looked at embracing within our trust alongside this leadership programme is creating clear career pathways for all our support staff. So as teachers have their pathway through their main pay scale range and then their upper pay scale, and then obviously they may look to join SLT and join the leadership scale as well. We have career pathways for our administration staff, finance staff, site staff, teaching assistants, and it's all documented in terms of how they progress to that next level. Now, obviously, you have to have a vacancy for these career pathways, which can come from sort of natural wastage as people leave, those vacancies crop up. Sometimes those vacancies don't crop up, but we're still clear about wanting to develop our staff. And I think I mentioned previously that this may mean that they leave us and go and join another school in a trust, but we've done our job. We've developed those staff to be able to enable them to progress in their career, and we're more than happy to support that. So yes, if this individual or anybody else wanted to contact me about career pathways, I'm happy to discuss that with them also.
Brilliant, thank you, Laura. And then one more question that we had come in. Again, we've touched on this, but do you find resistance from staff when it comes to attending CPD for things that are not directly related to their subject? Obviously, we've said this a few times, Aspire is all about leadership. And it's not specifically pertained to a subject, I guess, a teacher or support staff are focused on. Is there resistance, or
there can be, and I think a lot of it might come down to time and time commitments, and CPD can always be seen as an additional element of their day-to-day job. I think, like you mentioned, Nick, the leadership, no, there isn't any resistance to that. Those members of staff want to be part of that, so they fully embrace it. But yes, I think you can face resistance. So that the key here is about selling the benefits of any CPD and how it will benefit that member of staff in their role, whether that's creating efficiencies, developing them for their future career. So I think it's quite very much sort of a bit of a sales pitch, I suppose, to those members of staff for something that might be different to and related to their subject or role.
Yeah, and I know that we also worked at times quite closely on those internal comms as well. Just making people understand the benefits of it and what they were going to achieve from the program. Brilliant. And it looks like we've had just one question submitted in our live poll, but what are the most tangible benefits you hope to see or are seeing as a result of the program? So this is actually quite similar to the question I was going to ask earlier as well. So you mentioned ROI to justify the cost of this program. How are you measuring it, or what's the metric for success?
It's important to measure impact. So what we're seeing is that we're using these delegates and to then go out to our schools and share their change management programs. Now, in the past, we may have looked to go outside of our school and bring in external advisors, which would come at a cost. So we're seeing some financial efficiencies with that. We're also seeing the tangible benefits of people utilising the skills and knowledge that they've learned and taking it back to their teams. So they're looking at filtering down what they're learning to their teams and essentially creating high-performing teams because they're really passionate about what they've learned. So it's they're going back to individual team members and sharing with them. And I think it's just sort of drip feeding slowly through the organisation. The culture change of this growth mindset we're seeing within some of these teams from the skills and knowledge that some of these delegates have picked up. And like I mentioned, it would be wonderful to bottle it up and spread it over all teams. So I think they're sort of some of the tangible benefits that we've seen.
Brilliant. We have had just another question come in as well. I'll say, have you found that attendees have been able to properly transfer what they've learned back to their teams and departments?
Yeah, I think so. I think like I just mentioned now, probably at the end of that, the question probably came in where they are going back to their teams and departments and sharing that skills and knowledge, understanding their leadership style. So they're more aware and they can reflect on how they support and manage their teams. In one of the first sessions, they did what we term a DISC profile. For any of you who aren't familiar with DISC profile, it's worth Googling. I think they have over 1 million customers worldwide in terms of this personality leadership program that they roll out. And we invested in this as part of day one, where a comprehensive questionnaire is filled in by each delegate. And from that is a full report of about 20 pages of the leadership style of these individuals and how they relate to other people in their team that might display different sort of personality traits. So it's similar to sort of your Myers-Briggs kind of thing that people might be more familiar with, sort of that traditional kind of thing. But this is more of a contemporary modern take on it and more sort of up-to-date take on it. And that file that they were able to take away, they can refer back to. So I think what we've seen is greater leadership, definitely, in those teams that these people have gone back to. For those members of staff that currently don't lead a team, like I mentioned, got some lower level administrators, IT technicians that don't manage staff. We've seen those skills transferred to how they manage their stakeholders. So although they're not directly accountable for those members of staff in terms of how they liaise and respond to those people, we've been able to see those skills canvas into dealing with stakeholders, which has been interesting to see.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Laura, for joining us, not just for joining us today, but for involving us in this program. I think it's, like I said, I think it's really remarkable. I wanted to help us spread the word of it. I think there's a lot of schools and trusts out there. I think education in the UK in particular needs to be disrupted a bit. So I think it's good to see these types of initiatives taking place. I will share now your email address in the chat there. So if anyone does want to reach out to Laura directly, Louis from my team will also, after this, share around the recording of the session in case you do want to forward that on to other people, and we'll include Laura's email in that as well. So if you want to take a note of it. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for just being so forthcoming and open and transparent about what's worked and what you've learned along the way. And hopefully those who have attended the session today have definitely taken something away from this, some inspiration. If you had any other closing words or anything else, any advice?
I think it's about always looking to continually improve, and I think a lot of schools and MATs out there are doing that, but also collaborating and networking together as well, and sharing what we're doing, because it's for the good of our young people who are in education. So I think to sort of bottle things up and keep it to yourself when you've got something exciting to share that is driving school improvement. It's important to share that with other trusts. So yeah, that's probably closing comments.
Yeah, rising tide floats all ships. That's what we say. Thank you so much, Laura, and thank you for everyone who's joined us today. We will send this around afterwards, and best of luck with this first round of the Aspire program, finishing it off. We look forward to future ones together.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. Thanks, everyone.